Their friends heard leaks and previews of their material, but they were keen to hone their craft before unleashing their wares on an unsuspecting public. They were determined to give it their best shot, but weren't too bothered if it fell apart or was badly received. They obtained a booking to play their first gig at a local haunt called the Grapes in Sheffield, but practised for and worked towards this gig for almost an entire year beforehand. They were extremely young, and they knew they had nothing to lose. There might have only been one Arctic Monkeys gig if it hadn't gone well. If it didn't work out, they knew they had given it their all and would have a rethink. The Grapes gig would prove to be another major event, a pivotal moment for the Arctic Monkeys.
We just went back in car home, and we dropped his mate off, and it came on Radio 2, and then on the way back, just before he got back in car, it was on Radio 1. Then he got back in, when he got in car, he goes, "I've just seen you on MTV, like on..."
The first Arctic Monkeys gig at the Grapes on the 13th of June 2003 proved to be a resounding success. The guys had stumbled upon a formula that worked and were operating like a slick, well-oiled machine. Each constituent feature slotted in perfectly, and the overall effect transcended the sum of their parts. The empathy and rapport established within the space of a very short period recalled that of the early Jam, The Who's adolescent fury, the Beatles' infectious vibrancy, or the Buzzcocks' immediacy. The good-natured bonds within the band drew comparisons with the gang-like alchemy of the Clash. Each song was accessible, even terse, hitting surging peaks and sending the crowd into a frenzy of delirium and ecstasy. Every track seemed like an instant classic in the making, a jewel of observation and melodic thunder. The guys couldn't have hoped for a better reception. As their confidence grew, they played more local gigs and immersed themselves in creating new tunes. They got tighter and tighter as a unit, ironing out minor flaws and identifying where their strengths lay. They egged each other on to come up with the ultimate killer riff or the best rewrite of a White Stripes tune. The early gigs were in pubs, performing in front of only between 7 and 20 people, but the guys remained completely focused and immersed in their craft. Jeff Barradale, their manager, would drive them around in his battered old Saab and sing their praises whenever he got the chance. His precocious charges were always level-headed and curious to learn. The collective empathy and group interplay increased in its sophistication, and the guys' self-confidence on their instruments grew and grew. By word of mouth, a discernible buzz began to circulate around the Arctic Monkeys. Friends would tell friends, and the audiences at their gigs increased in both quantity and intensity. The guitars were loud, and the rhythms carried an infectious charge. From the outset, the band were determined to develop a grassroots, organic support from their local area and around the north. This meant eschewing any hype or PR and using their music to speak for itself. As gigs became more boisterous and bolstered by sheer adrenaline, they had to seek out larger and more appropriate venues. They were vehement about trying to hone their craft away from the distractions of record company scouts. College took a back seat for the four guys as they drove themselves on to improve, soak up new influences, and work out a definable philosophy, a spirit, a unifying theme or project. They knew they wanted to express themselves with humour and honesty and tell the world of their experiences of life in Sheffield in the 21st century, but they were keenly aware of the need to make the music as crisp, urgent and danceable as possible too. With admirable firepower and an impressive array of original tunes, the Arctic Monkeys were becoming a highly accomplished, if slightly raw, proposition. They learned note for note all the White Stripes and Vine songs and incorporated these influences into their own irrepressible synthesis. Finely crafted, rooted in rhythm, and awash with floating melodies and instrumental flair, their sound became hard to pigeonhole, but impossible to dislike.
No, I think it's like there's always them bands, always like Harrison's and Milburn. We all like started it. Well, Milburn were going a lot longer than us because we used to go and watch them when we were like 15 and that. But like all bands started at the same time, so like, and then I think like we start doing our right for ourselves, and then like I think a lot of focus goes on to.
It's not like.
Yeah.
I'm mates with Tom from Milburn, it's just I'm mates with Tom.
So I used to play football with
Yeah.
the Red Rose.
The Arctic Monkeys were becoming the name to drop amongst Sheffield teenagers and music lovers, and a palpable buzz surrounded their every move. They performed gigs further afield in the north and were developing a strong constituency of word-of-mouth support. A £250 demo was recorded quickly with great spontaneity and verve. Barradale saw potential in simply giving away copies of their 24 songs rather than flogging them, as this would expose them to new listeners at a meteoric rate. However, the Arctic Monkeys' first great idea was to maximise the power of the internet and spread their message via file sharing across the world. Along with a number of engrossing live shows, they had found a willing, loving audience. Venue sizes had to be accommodated to meet this demand. The group's webmaster of their official website, Mark the Sheriff Bull, put the contents of Beneath the Boardwalk, a renamed upload of the demo CD, on his web pages and made them freely available to download. These tracks quickly became available on several peer-to-peer file-sharing networks. The guys became one of the first bands to fully exploit the power of the internet to build a huge following, and this certainly made the record industry sit up and take notice. The official website went from receiving a couple of hits a week to 15,000 in a month, as interest in the group spread like wildfire. The band made available 24+ of their early tunes as MP3 files on the website. These were grabbed for free and shared by fans amongst their peers, a pure example of grassroots democracy in action. Through touring the country, mainly in the north, they created their own following from scratch and actually encouraged fans to distribute their material via the file-sharing sites. With no external influence of record companies and PR and marketing types, they were able to foster a unique sense of community and camaraderie without hyperbole. They bypassed the traditional machinery of the corporate music industry and let the music stand on its own terms. It was the antithesis of feeding people the same diluted, homogenised identikit pap over and over again. Fans spread the word across the planet via emails, downloads and online bulletin boards, and very soon the Arctic Monkeys had gone from plodding pub hopefuls to becoming the most talked about up-and-coming rock and roll band in the world. They performed a series of spontaneous off-the-cuff guerrilla gigs that harked back to a tradition in British pop, encompassing John Lennon and Yoko Ono love-ins, Pink Floyd's 18-hour Technicolor Dream, and the 1970s punks who performed in defiance of local authorities who were trying to ban them. The extraordinary rise of the group offered the most prominent evidence of a fast-growing culture emerging in contemporary British pop, whereby the net, as well as text messaging and other modern technologies, managed to eschew the accepted formal channels of the music industry to create its own scene. Despite Noel Gallagher's claim that no band would ever get anywhere with a name like theirs, the Arctic Monkeys had struck gold, though with no royalty payments at stake. The demand for copies of their limited edition debut single, 5 Minutes with the Arctic Monkeys, actually outstripped supply by 5-1, making it the hottest musical item going on eBay. The 5 Minutes with the Arctic Monkeys EP was made available to download by May 2004, which drew the attention of Radio 1, elements of the music press and even the tabloids. Limited to 1,000 CD copies and 500 7-inch vinyl single copies, this was snapped up avariciously and received much acclaim and coverage all over the media. These rollicking, stomping neo-punk anthems, also available on iTunes, proved an instant hit among those in the know. The package included the insidiously catchy Fake Tales of San Francisco and the remarkable Frantic From the Ritz to the Rubble, both unstoppable slabs of pile-driving vibrancy. There was a sense of something special and singular at work. Gigs became rowdier and more celebratory, with fans knowing each song word for word, even though most of them hadn't been properly released. The grassroots chat room frenzy circulated around the country and the world and prompted serious debate amongst music critics. In the meantime, the guys resisted the temptation to sign a record deal, to the extent that record label representatives and scouts were banned from attending their gigs. This was based on the logic of, we have achieved so much so far without them, why let them in now? This admirable restraint and dignity was in place from the very outset of their lifespan, with Barradale having been recruited as manager purely on the basis that no corporate types would be allowed into the inner sanctum of the group. Radio 1 rhapsodied about the Arctic Monkeys' winning blend of witty, amusing lyrics and catchy, hook-filled melodies, and the press wanted to know more about the lives behind the songs. The momentum surrounding the quartet was taking on a life of its own. Then, in April and May 2005, a UK tour became a sellout, and tickets were being exchanged on eBay for up to £100 a go. The guys could hardly believe their fortune, yet remained obsessed with improving their sound and writing more songs. There was now talk of a new Sheffield musical scene springing up in the wake of the Arctic Monkeys, whereby acts like Gled Hill, the Long Blondes, Milburn, Stoney and the Harrisons were making their mark and warranting attention from further afield. The Arctic Monkeys were creating a stir that hadn't been witnessed since the days of Brit Pop, and they stood poised to attain true greatness and ubiquity.
I mean, even when you go when you go south, a lot of people don't sometimes get what you're on about. So they said we'd be nice, but we're not really. We never really set out to be like Coldplay or anything like that.
I mean, we didn't think that we could sell like Sheffield a week apart to like 1,000 people each night, or go up to Glasgow like last night, and it was like a ginormous venue.
In June 2005, the Arctic Monkeys were courted by Lawrence Bell, the owner of the highly regarded independent label Domino Records, who ran the company from his flat and pursued a strict policy of only signing artists that he liked. The Daily Star reported that this was followed by a £1 million publishing deal with EMI and a £725,000 contract with Epic in the USA. These stories were vehemently denied on the group's website, dubbing the tabloid paper The Daily Stir. Domino were famous for pushing left-field, uncompromising, rootsy mavericks such as Will Oldham and Pavement. So whilst the group's sound differed considerably from their roster, they shared a certain luminosity and outsider status. Signing to a respected independent gave them a degree of security and, most importantly, much creative autonomy, which would have been in short supply on a major.